So we'll just jump into the questions. When did you start playing chess, and did you have teachers who got you started? And I saw Arthur Eade was mentioned on your website.
Yes, that's my dad. Arthur taught me the game of chess, and but I didn't get started playing until Bobby Fischer started challenging for the world championship. My first tournament game was in 1972. My dad, my younger brother, and I would play after dinner. And then when I started to beat him, he took me to the. He was a professor at the local college, and he took me to or he had his colleague, a math professor, pick me up and take me to the State College Chess Club, where I ran into like C and B players that were stronger than I was. And they got me started into playing tournament chess. But Bobby Fischer was on the cover of magazines and on the front page of New York Times, and it was a very exciting time. And I just got caught up into chess, never looked back. When I was in high school, my high school chess team, if it qualified for the Western Mass Connecticut Valley Championship, it always finished last. And my sophomore year, I was board one, and we finished in a tie for third. My junior year, we won it, and I was a Class A player at the time. I went from my first rating was a Class D, and then I got a Class C rating, and I think there was one supplement where I was a B player, but I jumped to A player strength pretty quickly, and it was pretty much by playing the guys at the North Adams State College, and all those guys there. The strongest player was a B player, and I got to be stronger than he was. So high school was the high school team was a great environment. I really liked team competitions.
And then the next question was kind of about your titles. Do you remember the tournament that secured you your national master title?
That was in 1981, and I don't recall exactly which tournament, but I was very active at the time, playing in a lot of tournaments, and I was playing in the Santa Clara Chess Club, and I won that club championship a couple of years in a row, and there were masters there, um, and I was an expert rated. I was an expert rated player back in New England, where I grew up, and when I came out to California, there were a lot more titled players, and so I got stronger just by playing them, and I earned that title in one of those tournaments. It may very well have been in a Santa Clara tournament, but I played in and around the San Francisco Bay Area, and I played a lot of strong players and just got better and better. The FIDE title, let's see, I might get this one wrong, but I think it was in 1993. I got the FM title. FIDE Master, at the time there was GM, Grandmaster, IM, International Master, and FIDE Master. And you had to have a FIDE rating of 2,300 over a period of 24 games. And I played a lot of FIDE Futurity rating tournaments, which were tournaments designed to get people FIDE ratings. So you would have some players that had FIDE ratings and some players that did not. And so I organized a number of them because there weren't too many players in the Bay Area that had FIDE ratings. And so we were all masters, national masters, but we all got FIDE ratings. And mine was over 2,300, and I maintained it for over 24 FIDE rated games. And that got me the FM title. Well, there was a tournament. I would say there's two that spring to mind. One was around the time that I got the FM title. I played in a tournament, and I didn't win it, but I played. I had 3 draws in the tournament, so I didn't get. And I was undefeated in the other ones, but I drew an FM, an IM, Mark Lesky, and a GM, Nick DeFermian. And so that was like the first time that I really felt like I belonged with titled players. And then probably my best result was in the Amateur Team East. Steve Doyle from New Jersey holds this every year. It's a very strong team tournament. And so we got a bunch of us from California to go and play in it. It was basically a fun tournament and a strong tournament too. And I won my game against I am Victor Frias, drew against Grandmaster Joel Benjamin, and won the other games. So I had a great result on board one, and that was probably my best result. I knew a player that he would scoff at the international masters and FIDE masters like myself because he said, you know, if you didn't play correspondence chess, you didn't play real chess. Because you really had to be accurate in correspondence chess. But for me, you know, the funny thing is, and this is, I don't know if this is true for very many players, but for me, it was the way I learned openings, you know, because I would set up the game from the start every game. And so I would play over the opening of the correspondent game. And every time, and then it would just stick in my head. And so I wasn't one, I was never one for studying openings. And that was the way I learned the various systems that I played. That was the way I learned correspondence chess. There's probably a million things I want to talk about, but I made a lot of friends, grandmaster friends, and they're making a living now teaching chess. But it used to be very difficult for them to, when they got older and not as competitive, and you couldn't win money playing chess. It was very hard. It was a hard life, and so now that they can teach kids to play chess, this is a win-win. You know, because if you give a kid the gift of chess, you give a gift that can last a lifetime. You know, it's a educational tool when they're young. You know, because the confidence they get in playing chess is directly transferable back into the classroom. Multiplication tables don't seem so complicated if you think you can play chess. And as an adult, it's a pleasant pastime. And when you get to be my age, you're starting to have aches and pains and doctor's appointments and things like that. And it's a solace. You know, when I'm playing chess, I'm not worried about anything else, just the chess game. So give the gift of chess to a child. And these grandmasters now are getting an income to teach. And so I see that I'm very positive about the developments of chess in the United States. And St. Louis has become the mecca of chess in the United States and probably throughout the world. So what's going on there in St. Louis and all the great world caliber chess players that are coming from the United States now. You know, I'm very, very optimistic about chess in the United States. And I wasn't always. Freedom, the book that I had published, it's about, you know, it's called Your Path to Recovery. And one of the things that I learned was that I had equated spirituality with religion. And I had left the church when I was, after I was confirmed and never went back. And I didn't like some of the things that were associated with religion. And I didn't realize that that has nothing to do with your own personal spirituality. And you know, I don't tell anybody what to believe, and whether it's a church, a temple, a mosque, a synagogue, whatever it is that you go to, or if you don't go to any of those things. I go to Ananda, which is a yoga facility, but it's also the spirituality is based on ancient Indian principles, which I find very attractive. And they make a profound sense to me. It's ancient wisdom that I am struggling to adapt to the modern world. And so that's a lot of what the book is about. And also on Pod TV, I have a weekly show called Change Your Mind, which is in the background. And change your mind because I think that I say my opening statement is I'm James Eade. I live in the divided states of America. And how do we become united again? And it's not by changing other people's minds. Sometimes it's about changing our own mind. And my own mind has changed a great deal. And I used to be achievement oriented. I wanted to win at chess. That was the only outcome I cared about was winning. You know, I didn't like if it was a well played game that ended in a draw. You know, I didn't say, oh, that was a good game. You know, I didn't win. You know, so my attitude has completely changed now. And so it's not about winning. It's about enjoying the activity, you know, and being in the moment in the activity and enjoying. And if a position develops that's boring to me, you know, it's not a good game. If it's a position to me that's interesting, that I have, that like we talked earlier about the aha moment, solving a complicated problem, you know, then whether I win or lose or draw isn't as important as how much enjoyment I got out of playing the game. So I still play the game. I just don't play it competitively, because when I play competitively, then I revert back to that guy that wanted to win at all costs. And so again, I was achievement oriented. I got promoted a lot in corporate America, and got well compensated. Lived in Pacific Heights in San Francisco. Drove a nice car, suit and tie to work every day. And but making computers run faster, and I supported the trading system for Charles Schwab, and if the trading system went down, Schwab didn't make any money. So, there was a lot of pressure. And I realized, I was a kind of a crisis junkie. I loved the pressure. I had a pager that was on call 24/7, and I loved it. 3 a.m., the call comes, the system's down. Okay. I was wide awake, adrenaline rush, really all over. Now I'm much more into finding serenity and being calm than I was in my playing days, in my competitive days. And simultaneous with my competitive chess playing, I was also trying to get the next promotion. I was always trying to get, more money, bigger job, and I found out later in life that none of those things that matter as much as, is happiness, and being loving and kind to people is better than being the sarcastic, obnoxious guy that I could be. So, putting people down doesn't make me any better, And a lot of in our corporate environment, in our American capitalism, what we do is we try to raise ourselves up by stepping on someone else's neck. And I think that's all backwards. We really need to give people a leg up and help each other. And this is what the Eade Foundation does. And these are people I've never met, I'm never going to meet, but I know that I made a difference in their lives. And that gives me great satisfaction. And it's a higher high than I could ever get with alcohol and drugs, So ingesting foreign substances, it's a thing in my past. I don't have to do anything. I don't even take Tylenol now, so it's it's a different game that I'm playing now than the one that I used to play. I didn't play any overseas tournaments. It was only in the UNIS.
Okay.
I did when I was representing FIDE for the United States. I was the zone president, and I traveled and played blitz chess with other players in Istanbul and Thessaloniki. So I got some international. I attended an Olympiad. I never qualified. I was never came close to qualifying to play in it, but I got to spectate, and so that's my international claims to fame, but very, very limited. That was one of my proudest achievements in chess. We had run in the San Francisco. There's a great chess club, and it's a lending library called the Mechanics Institute. And the Mechanics Institute has helped sponsor 2 Pan Pacific tournaments. And Pan Pacific there used to be like a World's Fair. It was sort of like that but only for like Asian countries to come over and do demonstrations of the various technologies and that sort of thing. So Pan Pacific was a title that we adopted from that. And, I was part of the Mechanics Institute chess scene for a long time. And in 1994, we were planning on the 3rd one. But there was a lot of talk and no action. I don't want to speak ill of anyone, but I didn't see anything going on that was going to make the tournament happen. So I just pretty much took charge and started extending invitations. The tournament itself, we got a title sponsor along with the Mechanics Institute, which put in a good chunk of change. We also had Mindscape, who produced the Chessmaster playing program. At the time, it was a great off-the-shelf program that was very, very strong. And they put in $20,000 for the budget. The budget turned out to be a little over $60,000. But an FM, Mark Pinto, and a real friend of chess who's no longer with us, Neil Faulkner, and I were the guarantee committee, so that if we had any short funds, we would make up what it costs. And so I extended invitations to basically my favorite players, and uh, Nick DeFermian was the grandmaster who was our consultant. And so I would check with him to see who to invite and that sort of thing. And we had Boris Golko, John Nunn, Robert Hubner. Um, these are all pretty famous and pretty well respected players. But the one who won the tournament was Victor Korchnoi. And Victor Korchnoi was involved in a couple of tremendous matches with Karpov for the world championship, but he never won it. So he's often thought of as the strongest player never to win a world championship. I also had Josh Waitzkin, who is the subject of the Searching for Bobby Fischer movie, and Maurice Ashley, who became the first African-American grandmaster. So I had, and they were very young at the time. And I had the middle Polgar sister, Sophia. I invited her. I thought Susan and Judith were too expensive, to be honest with you. And so I got Sophia to play. And also Jejun, who was then the women's world champion. And that was my favorite story about this, because I had to work with the Chinese Chess Federation to get her to come. And I would write them a letter, get no reply. I would call them and they would say, we're studying the letter. And this went on, and I started to get a little nervous that this wasn't going to happen. And I had a friend who was a native Chinese speaker who I worked with, Charles Schwab, and he was visiting Beijing. And I asked him to translate the letter to Chinese and to hand deliver it to the Chess Federation, and he did. And then I got a response, and they approved her to come. So I met her at the airport, and was able to spend some time with her. And she had a grandmaster second who was there with her. And, it was we got, I think it was like $5,000 from the Chinese community in San Francisco to help support the tournament because we invited her. So the whole thing took a lot of planning, a lot of work. It was an organizational, as Shelby Lyman put it, he said it was an organizational tour de force. Because it was a Category 13 tournament back in 1995. There weren't that kind of tournaments being run, and it was still the strongest tournament ever run in San Francisco. And getting to spend time with Victor Korchnoi, Boris Golko, these were kind of heroes of mine, because they were the refuseniks. They got out of the former Soviet Union, and so I admired both of them, and I got to become friends with Boris Golko. Victor, not so much. He only, the only words that he really shared with me were, I had a cable car tour organized for the players, and he said, "I won't pass this up, but it was my nap time." And so that was the extent of my conversations with him. But I did spend time with his wife, Petra, who was a real ball of fire. She was great, and so and John Nunn, Robert Hubner stayed with us for a few days. John Nunn came over to the house, and one thing I'll never forget is Hubner looked at my book collection, and he didn't like my taste in books. Apparently, Hubner is a famous scholar, and so he took me shopping and bought a couple of books for me that he thought would elevate my reading. So I have very fond memories of that, and I'm very, very proud that we were able to pull that off.
With Gulko, I was interviewing Lev Albert, and he mentioned Gulko, and that he spoke with him the night before he escaped and everything. And do you
Yeah.
know much about what Gulko's story was after that? He had trouble getting out, didn't he? He was
Yes, he had to
abused.
go on long hunger strikes. Um, and I asked him when he came to the tournament. I asked him if he thought that the support he had in the West was important, and he said absolutely. And it was interesting because sometimes in that country at that time, you could just disappear. But he was pretty famous, so they couldn't just let him die, or make him go away. So he was able to get out with a lot of, because of his popularity in the West. So at least that was the story he told to me. And I thought that was pretty significant. I know Lev pretty well, and he's another one who got out and won the U.S. championship. But the thing that always comes to mind when I think of Lev is that there was a tournament after he left. He played in the tournament, but then left, and the publication of the tournament had his name removed. But they had the scores, so you could kind of fill in like they played player X in round 9, and you could backtrack what his score was by looking at the other players' results. So removing his name really didn't accomplish very much if you studied the tournament results.
Can you tell me about hypermodern chess and the books you published?
Yeah, hypermodern chess. This is I'm going to tell this story on myself because it was I was working at Charles Schwab, and I got this brilliant idea, which I thought was just marvelous because this will date me, and maybe you're old enough to remember this, but we had 5.25-inch floppies, and then they introduced 3.5-inch floppy disks, and many viewers won't know what floppy disks were, but at that time, it had enough storage capacity to fit a book on it. And so I thought, I'm going to put a chess book on a floppy disk so you can put it into your computer and read it on your screen. And I thought this was a brilliant idea. No one was doing it. And so I hired a programmer, quit my job, hired my programmer. And I said, okay, what I need is a programmer to do the coding, and I need authors to develop content. So I started Hypermodern Chess. The company was called Masterpiece Development, but the mark was Hypermodern Press. And Hypermodern it had a little hummingbird as the part of the logo. And so, and I grew up, my system was one of my first chess books. So it was part of Aaron Nimzovich was part of the Hypermodern school. So I always had an affinity for that. And so I started to publish books, and a couple of reprints. One was by Bob Berger, who I knew from San Francisco from the Mechanics Institute, who did The Chess of Bobby Fischer. It was a great book, and I reprinted it, tried to do everything really classy, nice covers, everything. So I had a friend in the chess world who was like number 2 at this printing company, so he could print the chess books for me. I paid for them, of course, but it was a nice arrangement through chess to have all these pieces come together. And what I did was, it was called a virtual company. So I didn't have any employees, but I wrote contracts with all the authors. I also had someone who would do the typesetting, proofreading, and everybody, we just wrote a contract for every piece of the work. So got John Watson, Larry Evans, who's the grandmaster, who's no longer with us, but he produced some brilliant writing, some brilliant books, and the one that I reproduced was Modern Chess Brilliancies. Of course, they weren't too modern, but it was still a good book, still great games and good analysis. Larry Evans helped collaborate with Bobby Fischer, of course, in 60 Memorable Games. Then I had some original, I wrote the tournament book for the 1995 Pan Pacific, for example, and that was published under Hypermodern Press. And so that was my introduction to the publishing world, and I will just, the story I have to tell myself is that I was getting ready to publish on 3.5-inch floppy disks. But I made the mistake of sending my programmer Hübner analysis. Robert Hübner is a famous grandmaster from Germany who's also a papyrist. He studied ancient papyri and translated that. And so his analysis of games had, as most analysis do, variations, and no problem. And then you would have subvariations, no problem. But Hübner would be the type that would have nested variations to his subvariations, and my program would blow up on the nested variation. So I had a software background. I wasn't going to release anything that was buggy, even though it didn't apply to any of the other books that I was publishing. They all would have read fine. I could have published. I should have published, but I was stubborn and I didn't. And then Chess Base came out, and Chess Base was doing everything I was going to do, and they were doing it better and more things than I was doing. And I went, oh man, I missed my chance. But wait, second to market won't be so bad. And then New in Chess came out, and I thought, oh no, there's no such thing as third to market. And I found out later that the people developing Chess Base and New in Chess had started out together and had, they're kind of split off and went their separate ways and bad faith and bad arguments and what have you. And so they published one right after another. And it was like a 1-2 punch that knocked me out. So I stopped publishing. And because my whole point was not to publish chess books, but to publish electronic chess books. And they cornered the market. So
What about Chess for Dummies? I think that's a very popular book. It seems like I see it at bookstores and everything.
yes, smartest thing I ever did in chess for dummies. And because I was in the publishing field, I was a senior systems programmer at one time in my career. And I noticed the IBG books, the publisher of the For Dummies series, and they were all computer oriented at the time. And so I was doing all of this publishing myself. And so I bought Microsoft Word for Dummies. And the Microsoft Word manual was of very little help. It was almost indecipherable. And the For Dummies book was brilliant. Every question I had, I could look it up, find the answer, and it just helped me with doing macros and all of the kind of stuff that I needed in the word processing arena, which I had not come from and didn't know that much about, and it really helped me get up to speed. So I loved the product that they were producing, and I loved the publishing story because what they did was break all the rules. They insulted the reader in the title, calling them dummies. They published oversized books, so they didn't fit properly in the bookstore shelves, and they were, black and yellow, kind of garish. But the brilliant part about that is if you did go into a bookstore and you saw it across the room, you knew it was a For Dummies book. So, and what they did was because the bookstores would want a certain percentage right off the top, they went to Costco and discount uh, mechanisms to get the product out there. And so the bookstores had to come to them and cut a deal with them. So I, as a publisher myself, I thought, oh my goodness, they broke all the rules, and then they got in the driver's seat. It was a great story. And they were just in Fremont, which is across the bay from me, just drive over the Dumbarton Bridge, and I'm in Fremont. And so I was following them. And then they came out with what they called, I saw this announcement, they were coming out with a trade press. So it wasn't going to just be computers anymore. And the thing about the For Dummies books was they would demystify something that you thought was too complicated. And I thought chess is perfect for them because everyone thinks chess is too complicated. I could be teaching kids, and when their parents would come to pick them up, I'd ask them, "Did you play chess?" And they would say, "Oh no, it's too complicated." I'm teaching your kid. Anybody can learn to play chess. I try to stress that it's very difficult to become a master at it, but to be able to play and enjoy it, it's not that complicated. You do have some learning to do before you can even start to play. So it can seem complicated to begin, but I know people that play each other that are having more fun playing chess at a fairly low level than Karpov and Kasparov were having, beating each other's heads against the wall. So anybody can play chess and anybody can enjoy the chess. But what I wrote them a query letter, which is basically, I think chess would be a great For Dummies book, and I'd like to write it for you. And they wrote back and asked for a sample chapter. So I wrote the sample chapter. They wrote back and they asked for a second chapter. And I wrote that. And I got positive feedback. And I was at a family function and talking to my wife's uncle, and he asked me what I was doing, and I told him what I was doing, and he says, "Oh, I know somebody who knows somebody at IDG Books," and he put me in touch with her, and she made a call and set up a face-to-face meeting. So now they knew who I was, and I had given them sample chapters, but they were going to come out with Bridge for Dummies. That was their plan. But when I had the face-to-face meeting, they decided to go with Chess for Dummies first, and then they gave me the contract. And my goodness gracious, it's the U.S. Chess Federation has been publicizing how they have 100,000 members. I sold 100,000 copies of Chess for Dummies in the first year, and it kept selling, and it's still in print. I wrote it in 1995. It was published in 1996, and it's still selling. And the Queen's Gambit, the Netflix show, there was a tremendous spike in sales. It was almost like it was the first year all over again for me. So, and this is, you also say it's a renewable resource because the audience that I wrote for were the parents of gifted children, because, it's not, the For Dummies series is a reference book. It's not a how-to book. It's not how to play chess, but if you have a question, you can look it up, which is how I handled Microsoft Word for Dummies. And so the parents want to be able to look something up. If they hear a phrase or some en passant, they can look it up. And so it's a perfect book for the parent of a kid who's learning to play chess and is getting good at it. And they don't know how to speak the language, so I can teach them to talk the talk. And so there are always new kids coming up, and always parents of those kids who want to buy Chess for Dummies so that they could talk to their kid about the game.
Can you tell me about the Eade Foundation and what its aims are?
Yes, so I was president of the Chess Trust, which is a 501c3 charity, which means you can donate to it and write it off your taxes. And it's been around for about 50 years. Started originally by Harold Dundas, a lawyer from Boston area. So tip of the hat to Harold, ahead of his time, and a great supporter for chess for many, many years. And a mainstay at the Boylston Chess Club in Boston. So shout out to those guys. And he started the trust a long time ago. And I was on the executive board for US Chess from 1996 to 1999. And in 2000, I became a trustee of the US Chess Trust. I also became a zone president for FIDE, representing the United States in FIDE in 2000. But in 2005, I became the treasurer of the U.S. Chess Trust. In 2010, I became the president. And so from 2010 to 2019, I did a lot of things for chess through that organization, a wonderful organization. But U.S. Chess changed its tax status from 501c4 to 501c3. And unfortunately, the then president and vice president felt that the U.S. Chess Trust, even though we've been a supporter for 50 years, was now a competitor. And the atmosphere really went south. And I probably, looking back, I probably could have just ridden that out, because I worked with a lot of presidents from U.S. Chess, and could have worked with ones after them. I'm sure, but I just thought it was I loved working for the Chess Trust. Everybody was pulling the oars in the same direction. We were all doing it for the good of chess, and so this kind of nastiness that started between the two organizations really put me off, and I didn't want to be involved anymore. So I thought, one of the things about U.S. Chess Trust was it was only a U.S. organization, and so we would get requests from international sources, and we would have to say no. So I thought, well, why don't I start a foundation that does what U.S. Chess Trust does, but for the world? And so I said, okay, why don't I start my own foundation, do it myself? And I did. And I called it the Eade Foundation. It's my father, Arthur Eade, passed away the year before, and I wanted to do something to honor him. And I also give the Arthur Award once a year, which is $1,000 to the best essay that is the support of the mission of the foundation. And so I've given 4 of those awards, maybe 3, maybe 4. I'm blanking now. Alexi Root won one year for her book on the U.S. Women's Championships, which I learned a great deal from. I thought I was pretty informed about chess in the United States, but she really did a great job of research, and I learned a lot about the women who came before me. Before I became active in 1972, and there were a lot of strong women players before that I knew nothing about, and learned a lot from that book. So she won that Arthur Award for that year. But my elevator pitch is, we're building chess communities, and what we're doing is helping people who can't start a chess program wherever they are in the world, and help them get started to create the chess program. And in and of itself, starting a chess program, getting kids to play chess, you start to get the parents to be involved, and you develop a community. And some of these people that we've helped get started have kind of become rock stars in their local community. Like one got a mayoral certification, because they're bringing chess into the schools, or they're some of these places, kids are worrying about where their next meal is coming from. And so people say, well, why introduce them to chess? Well, there's a lot of hours in the day that and I can't feed everybody, but if you can teach them to play chess, then there's a lot of positive activity, and their confidence grows. We don't tell them this. There's no need to tell them this. They think if they can play chess, they must be smart. And so their confidence grows. And so we see this over and over again. And the organizers that I work with directly, they, become very proud of what they're doing, and the community starts to respect them and look up to them. So it's a very positive thing. I'm very proud of what we've been doing. Let's see, I can't remember. I think Uganda might have been my first. Oh no, Nicaragua was my first. In Africa, Uganda, Zambia, in Cape Town, South Africa, and we just started a program in Zimbabwe. We've done Colombia, Nicaragua, Lebanon, Bhutan in Asia. Some of these are just people that know people, and get contacted by an intermediary that says, I know somebody who wants to start a chess program in here. Can you help them? And now I can say yes. But I always wanted to say yes. I was tired of saying no to these people. But the supply is all, the demand is always greater than the supply, because once you give them chess sets and equipment and that sort of stuff, then they want phones, they want computers, and that's not what the Eade Foundation does. So I end up, and I wish I had known this going in, but I end up saying no much more than I thought I ever would. So it's, you try to be a philanthropist, but to be, if my experience is any guide, you'll end up saying no much more often than you can say yes.
And can you talk about the Outstanding Career Achievement Award from the USCF and kind of what they highlighted on your career?
Yeah, I was very tickled to win that, because we did have that tension when I was the president of the U.S. Chess Trust, and with the leaders of the U.S. Chess, the United States Chess Federation. But when they gave me that award, it was very healing for me, because it was like and one of the things that I had trouble when I was an executive board member in 1996 and 1999, because the finances were not good, and they were telling the members that the finances were fine. And I just had a real problem with that, and bent more than one nose out of shape, because the finances were not good. And vendors were putting us on a cash only basis. In other words, we weren't paying our bills. And so vendors said, I'm not going to give you any more books until you pay. And so it was a very kind of dire situation, and needed everybody pulling in the same direction to try to fix it. But we couldn't even get people to admit that there was a problem. And very shortly after that, the whole house of cards collapsed, and they ended up moving from New Windsor, New York, to Crossville, Tennessee. Um, and they have since moved from there to St. Louis. And they've done a lot of things, like they've gotten out of the books and equipment business. They've done, so they don't have the overhead that they had back in the 90s. Um, and they made a lot of changes. And one of the things that I really commend them about is that they've got their financial reporting and transparency in line. And the people that did that, deserve a tip of the hat. And so I felt like, okay, now you're not you're trustworthy organization again. And I think that one of the reasons that people would give money to the U.S. Chess Trust is they didn't really trust U.S. Chess Federation send money to them because they didn't know where the money was going. Um, and if it was going, you want to send money to support a program or something like that, and if it was going to pay the employees, that wasn't the intention. So people felt, well, the trust won't do that, and the trust had very low overhead, and the money that you gave to the trust would go to the purpose. And that's the change with the Eade Foundation. If you send me money, even if it's through GoFundMe or something like that, I always cover whatever, the percentage they take off, PayPal, GoFundMe, whatever it is, I cover it. So every dollar that you give to the foundation goes to the programs. And, I have no overhead. So it's one of those things but I do admire that they really repaired their reporting, financial reporting, and their trustworthiness as an organization. Um, and, that award that they gave me was like coupled with the financial integrity that they reestablished for themselves, made me a supporter. So I've been going to delegates meetings in August, wherever they are, since. Although I think I'm getting a little long in the tooth for that, I might not be doing that too much longer. But the U.S. chess governance is a it's a complicated organization. You have it started out as a uh, alliance, a federation of state affiliates. So if you had the state affiliates, and that's why they have these delegates representing the states coming to this annual convention and passing the changes that they pass, and you have an executive board which runs the governance in between the annual meetings. So it's a complicated structure governance wise. So it's I really commend all the people that are putting in their time and energies to doing this work. Um, but it's not easy. And back in 1991, I think it was, I got I was started my chess business, which I ended up ceasing operations later that decade. But I got back into chess. I when I was at the peak of my paid career, um, I was working all the time. I didn't have time for chess. I played correspondence chess. I got my national master's correspondence or national correspondence master certificate, and then international chess correspondence master as well. I represented the United States in team competitions against other countries many times, and so I kept my hand involved by playing correspondence. And in those days, believe it or not, we sent postcards to each other. It wasn't like you could log on and play somebody like you can today. So that sometimes the games will last a very long time. And one of my favorite games from that era was against a player from East Germany. And I still think that the delays were like somebody was getting the mail with these notations on it, and they were looking at it like, "What are you doing in East Germany with it? Is this code? What are you talking about here?" And but the games would last for a long time. But I got started. Then I was the vice president of CalChess, the Northern California Chess Federation, and the president was Tom Dorish, who did a fantastic job of building chess in Northern California. He was a great organizer, and we went from very few members to about 800 members, and that's just for the state organization. So um, and he had a state championship, and we did a lot of things for the local players, and it was a very collegial board, and I kind of thought that that's the way things were. So Tom decided to run to be treasurer of the United States Chess Federation, and he roped me in to running for what they called a member at large, and I did, and I won the election. And I also, at that time, same year, 1995, I ran against Ira Lee Riddle, who is the president of the Chess Journalists of America, and I won that. It was also a national election that I won, and so you know, besides organizing the tournaments, besides playing the tournaments, I was getting involved in the national scene, in governance and in chess journalism, and I published the Chess Journalist magazine, edited it, and got writers to contribute to it. So I just loved reading and writing about chess, and that's what I started doing. So I had written my first book was Remember the McCutcheon, which is really an opening booklet about my repertoire in the McCutcheon variation of the French, and then the tournament book for the Pan Pacific, 1995 Pan Pacific, and then Chess for Dummies in 1996. And I've written a total of 6 books now, and so the Chess for Dummies, I think, was a big part of just helping to popularize chess, not only in the United States, but around the world. It's been translated into 8 languages, including Russian, which was very embarrassing to me. And my friend Mark Pinto is in FM, and I told him, Mark, it's been translated into Russian. And we didn't miss a beat. He said, well, when's it going to be translated into English? And I was like, oh, your friends keep you humble. But yeah, so I had a long playing career, got to the FM title, that's strength. I would say back in the 90s, I'd walk into a US championship and I knew everybody and everybody knew me. And but organizing the FIDE Futurities, I organized I Am Norm tournaments. Tal Shaked got his 3rd and final I Am Norm. Tal Shaked from Arizona in one of my tournaments. I was a regional vice president, which is they've done away with this title now, but my region was Northern South California, Arizona, Nevada, and Hawaii. So I ran an international master tournament for the continental states, but there wasn't anybody FIDE rated to invite from Hawaii. So I thought, okay, what do? I'll take the Californians who are FIDE rated. I'll take them over and run a tournament, futurity in Hawaii. And so I did that. I worked with the president of the Hawaiian Chess Federation, and we set up a tournament, and we got them all, the players that qualified the FIDE ratings. And so those are just the types of things that I wanted to do, both popularizing FIDE. It's now they've lowered their requirement. You had to be 2,200 to get a FIDE rating at one point, and now they've lowered it so anybody can get a FIDE rating. But at that time, it was very difficult to do. So I ran a lot of futurities, I Am Norm tournaments, and the 1GM Norm tournament. And I did a lot of grandmasters would come through San Francisco, and I would set up simul's for them and things like that. So I thought it was a very communal, very supportive work that we were doing. And when I got into U.S. chess governance, I found out there was that I can't remember who said this originally, but the politics were so vicious because the stakes were so small, and I had no idea what I was getting into, and it was very uncomfortable for me. And so I found my home in charitable works, U.S. Chess Trust first, and now the Eade Foundation. But I think they gave me the Career Achievement Award basically for all of the organizing events that I did. I also got in 2022, Marquise Who's Who designated me a distinguished humanitarian. So I'm going to be in the big book of biographies of Americans in the next the 2024 edition of Marquise Who's Who. So it wasn't all wasted.
That's interesting. That's great. Um, you mentioned correspondence chess. I always thought that would make a great documentary because I've heard people say that because titled players have 2 days to think about each move or whatever, the time control is that the games are almost perfect. So is it gone now, or with computers? So they too many people use computers, or
Oh, I still play online. I use the server GameNot, and so I play online. And because of my spiritual uh, work now, I don't want to play competitive chess because I don't like the person I become when I play competitively. But correspondence games online, everybody has a handle, so you don't see their face, you don't know their name. So I'm really just playing the game. So I'm just playing the board, and I'm playing to get interesting positions, not to win. I want to establish an interesting position, one that you get that aha moment after you solve it. It's that to me is the brilliance of chess. Is like, it could be done with a crossword puzzle and anything, any intellectual activity that allows you to solve a problem has always been attractive to me.
is there anything you would tell somebody getting started out in chess?
Well, the early on in chess, what is decisive in games is tactics. So one of the reasons I made a very quick jump from like a class D player, which was my initial rating, to a class A player, was I used these. I think they were Fred Reinfeld books. They were just collections of tactics. Like so, there would be 50 forks followed by 50 pins, and you solve them until you got the pattern recognition. And once you establish the pattern recognition, you could see, you didn't have to think and calculate, if I move my knight here, I can fork the king and queen. You would see it because it's a pattern that you recognize. So, you would be able to avoid your opponent's combinations and play your own because a combination is a series of moves that results in a tactic that ends up winning material or giving checkmate or something like that. So, but I think there are uh, defined. I do this in Chess for Dummies. There's elements to chess, and one of them we call it material, and I use the term force. And a pawn is the basic unit of force. We give it a value of 1. So each piece is given in terms of pawns, how much worth. So bishops and knights are called minor pieces. They're worth about 3 pawns. The bishop a little bit more, but because more positions favor the bishops than favor the knight, but they're roughly equal. And rook is worth 5, and the queen is worth 9. So you get to the point where you can see, whether or not I have equal material, or if I'm down material or up in material. And that's one of the basic things, an element of chess that you really need to have an understanding of, because you don't want to just move your queen out and allow it to be captured you know and time is another thing. We in chess we call it development. You develop your pieces, you get your pieces off the back rank out into the game where they can fight, and you tend to develop towards the center because a piece that is centralized has more squares that they can attack, and a piece's power is really tied to its mobility. Queen is the most mobile piece, so it's the most powerful. The rook is the next most mobile, so it's the most powerful. So if you have a piece that's mobile, it's powerful. And if you have a piece that's immobile, it's pinned, for example, it's not powerful at all. So you have to look in terms of time and developing your pieces to the optimal squares in the most efficient way. And so how you use the element of time is a tremendous factor in chess. So material, time, space. Chess in its essence is a game of spatial conquest. It's much like old armies battles. If you can press forward in the center, you would splinter the 2 armies into 2 smaller armies, and then you could attack with the larger force the smaller army and force it to capitulate. So chess is very much the same thing. So space is an important element of chess, and king safety, of course. If you lose your king, you lose the game. So you must make sure that your king is safe. Now you can talk about each element in its individual context, but you don't achieve mastery until you can balance them all. So I'm going to sacrifice a pawn for development, and it's going to be worth it. And how do you know that? Experience. It's like, and it also, the other thing I tell people, tactics first. Learn that, because that's the quickest way to decide a game until you're approaching expert level. But these things all have to come into it. Like, what type of game do you like to play? You have to figure that out about yourself. Some players love open games where there's no pawns in the way of the pieces, and the piece mobility is uninterrupted, and they attack. And so, if you like that kind of game, and most players when they're starting out like those types of games, so open games. And so, this is how you choose your openings. What openings should you play? Well, what kind of game do you want to play? So if you want to play tactics and quick fire, attack the king and play open games. And if you're more of a strategic maneuvering type of player, you play closed games. So open games, usually you lead e4. Closed games, you might play d4. And the d4 tends to have semi-open or closed types of positions, and e4 tends to lead to open or semi-open types of positions. So your opening choices will be dictated by what type of game you play. I didn't learn that until I was much a serious competitor, to play the types of openings that I liked to play, not that Bobby Fischer was playing. When I started out, everybody was playing what Bobby Fischer played because it was popular. And I found out later in life that that's not the way to go. The way is to find out what you like, not what Bobby Fischer liked. You're never going to play as good as he did anyways. So, and this goes into, the types of players, and I say, study your losses. Everyone wants to show their wins. I did that too. Everyone wants to show off to their friends the brilliant win that they had. But study your losses, because then you know what weaknesses you have, and then you can concentrate on improving them. So I was not a good endgame player, so I studied the endings. And I learned this by seeing my losses. Why did I lose? Well, I would get a bad pawn structure, and it would come to bite me in the ending. So what did I learn? I learned about pawn structures, keeping my pawns healthy, and I learned to become an excellent endgame player. So that was never my strength, but I adapted to what my weaknesses were. And when I concentrated on my weaknesses became my strengths. So this is how you get to be a good chess player. But when you're starting out, do it for fun. And if you're not going to have fun if you're always losing, so concentrate on tactics, and so you'll know when you have an opportunity to fork and win material, or pin and win material, and you don't end up missing those opportunities. And you see players beginning players play, and they miss a lot of opportunities because they don't have the pattern recognition yet. So just play example after example after example until those patterns are in your head. Like I said, you don't have to calculate, you see.